pretty cool. I mean, it's pretty amazing what's going on with the democratization of teaching because of the internet. Welcome to Archispeak, the podcast that talks about what it's like to work in the profession of architecture.
Welcome to episode 109 of the Archispeak podcast. I'm Neil Pan.
I'm Evan Troxel.
And I'm Cormac Phelan.
And this episode of Archispeak is sponsored by ARCAT and BQE Software. We'll talk more about each of them later in the show.
All right, so we have a quick announcement to make. We have a shout out to give to one of our longtime listeners and a good friend of mine, Pete Lavelle. You guys probably remember Pete. We hung out with him at the last Monterey Design Conference. And Pete and I used to work together, and he is now an architect. And I'm so happy to be able to call him an architect, and I'm so happy that he's done with this long journey because we all know how much effort and time it takes to do. And he's got 2 young kids, and he lives up in the Bay Area, and he is now, I'm super proud that he has finished that journey, and now he gets to just pay his dues every 2 years. So that's awesome. I'm so excited for him. So shout out to you, Pete. Thanks for everything that you've done. Thanks for being my friend, and I am so happy for you. So that was the first order of business for this episode of Archispeak, and we thought that we would do some kind of a grab bag of topics. We don't have a super special topic to go off this week, but we have a bunch of little things that we wanted to touch on. So, hey, Cormac, you have caught the first few episodes of Abstract, the Art of Design on Netflix, and so you've been going on about this. So, tell us a little bit about it and why it's worth watching.
So, I'm sure in everybody's office, somebody has received some email or text from one of their their friends saying, "Hey, you really need to watch this," and you do. And why? Because I said so.
Yeah. Okay. Good enough. Move on.
Yeah, that's it. Just I said so, and we're good, and you can move on, and you will thank me later. No, actually,
are there any standout episodes?
So I've worked my way through the first, I believe 5, maybe even 6, and all of them are standalone. They're presented as episodes, but they are standalone. And what's great about them is that it's a documentary about a particular designer and their journey from, that first seed of wanting to be a designer or to be an architect or to be whatever their path is on to where they are now. And all of these are industry leaders. There is a illustrator for the New Yorker. They talked with Bjarke Ingels. They talked with the director of design of Chrysler. I mean, all of these different ones. But what I was telling Neil before the show, I was like, it's both amazing. It gives me this charge. Like, yeah, this is exactly why I wanted to get into this profession. And it's also somewhat depressing because it's like, oh, why am I not doing that? Why am I not? I feel the same passion. Yeah. He said, somebody says something and you're like, yeah, I love that. That's great. You're like, wait, why am I not doing that? So,
yeah. So it's inspiring.
It's very inspiring. And
that's awesome.
And you'll like it because you guys, and I say you guys as in YouTube, but the you guys that are listening are going to find similar kindred spirits with these people that, that their journey and their inspiration and what fuels their fire to keep going and to keep pushing and to keep trying to innovate are things that are stuff that you feel and you think about all the time.
That's cool.
Whether you are, an architect or, a car designer or a set designer or an illustrator, every bit of it is something that you've thought about and you've talked about, There was one that kind of, I thought, and I texted Evan as I was watching this because, it was something that he says all the time is, the illustrator for the New Yorker, and I apologize for not remembering, half their names, but
Christopher Neiman, by the way.
Christopher Neiman, thank you, Neil. So Christopher gets, he talks about that his day outside of the studio, and the experience outside of the studio is just as much of an informer to what he does as what he does within the studio. And we're always talking about the life outside of the architecture studio and how important that is, and how important the experiences are to enrich our career, right, and enrich kind of our thinking, and it's just every one of these people have a shared story that every one of us who got into this design profession can really kind of grasp and appreciate. And I will say this, that the one about Big and his kind of rise to prominence in architecture, I kind of rolled my eyes, because that was the first one that, somebody had texted me and said, hey, you got to watch this. This is pretty amazing. And I will say that I probably never gave the guy, a fair shake, because though I'm not necessarily, I appreciate his work. I don't know if I'm a fan of it or not, but I will say that I am a fan of him after watching this, because there's something more, I guess, childlike in his approach. And I don't mean that in any kind of derogatory way. I mean that is, he looks at the purity of things. He looks at the way things could be if we didn't put all of these constraints on them.
That's the role of a designer right there.
And that's the role of the designer. And I was just like, God, this guy's awesome. I mean,
imagine the possibilities, right?
Exactly. And so I look at things differently, or I look at his stuff differently, because the way that he goes about doing it is not just this kind of formulaic thing. It really is trying to rethink and reshape. Does a power plant have to just be a power plant? Why
right.
can't it be a power plant and a ski lift, and a ski slope? Why not?
Yeah.
And you're just
and blow smoke rings, right?
And blow smoke rings. And you're thinking to yourself, why would you even think that?
Yeah. It's absurd.
And then you're just like, and then you're looking at it and you're thinking about it and you're like, why the hell not?
Yeah.
Why does it just have to be a power plant? Just this blob, kind of blight within the, your visual landscape. Why can't it be something fun? Why can't it be something more? And I like the fact, and I appreciate the fact, that this is the guy asking the questions of more.
Yeah. Well, he's famous for saying that when they have these charrettes, these initial kind of idea sessions, that they've worked really hard in their office to create a culture of safety where anybody can say anything. And so people are allowed to throw out absurd ideas. And it's not until later, when they pick one of the absurd ideas to go with, that it was obvious.
Yeah.
There's no way in most of the firms that people work for, any one of those absurd ideas would make it past the first round, if they were even allowed to be said at all, if you felt safe enough to be able to put it out there. But that's kind of the norm, is what it sounds like, and at least from the sound bites that I've heard. And that's why they're able to pull off some of this stuff, is because they're allowed to be daring. They give themselves permission to be daring and think big.
Right.
Well, there's 8 episodes in this series, and I'm really looking forward to number 2, which is Tinker Hatfield, the footwear designer at Nike.
That one was great. I mean, like I said, I watched all the way up through the one for the Chrysler designer, and they're all just fantastic. Because, like I said, but Tinker's was interesting because you learn about his story about how he became a shoe designer, because he was in school for architecture. He got a degree in architecture. He was running track for Oregon, and they started with, and I'm spoiling it for people, so I'll let you guys
stop.
Spoiler alert.
If you haven't watched it, watch it, and I won't spoil it. But I mean, come back and let's talk. Yeah, let's come back and let's talk about it, because I just find, as much as the what they produce, the journey to get there is equally, just amazing, or everybody has interesting stories about how they got to where they are now. And every one of their stories should be celebrated. And I think that, his is just another interesting story, how he just kind of like stumbled into something that he never, he did not plan on his life going in that direction. And it happened. And now he's at the top. He's the premier guy when it comes to, shoe design, or one of the premier guys in shoe design. And that's not where he was planning on going, but that's where he is.
Yeah.
And he embraced it and took it.
I hope that it says season 1. I hope they make more seasons of this, because
I really
there's a
hope
lot
they
of
do.
stories to be told, and this is going to be really cool. And if you guys are listening and you don't have a Netflix subscription, you can join for 1 month for free and check these out. So it might be worth it.
And Neil's login for Netflix is Neil.
And they're not even sponsoring the show, so we're not getting paid to say that. We just, this is going to be good.
Neil, you didn't change your password, right?
No,
I'm going to put it in
it's still the same. We'll
Okay,
put that
I'm
in
gonna
the
put it in
show
the-
notes for
We'll put it in
everyone.
the show notes for everyone to log in.
I hear Netflix looks the other way with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they do. No, they don't.
All right, so what's next?
Well, kind of along the same lines as you had mentioned something about the environment that Big's office has, and about anybody can kind of have the freedom to basically do the most absurd ideas and stuff like that. And it kind of reminded me, as you were talking about it, about some of the things that I was saying in this after work program that I've been recently been helping out with. Just started. It's kind of a yearly thing, and it's called ACE Mentoring Program.
Yeah.
And what ACE is architecture, construction, and engineering. And specifically what it is, and we'll put the link to the show notes, but anybody can go and find out anything about it and find out whether or not it's something that's offered within your area. But it's ACE, ACE mentor.org. And what it is that it helps high school students. Basically, it pairs you up with high school students to help inspire them to pursue careers in design and construction. A lot of times, we have these career days and things like that. And, you get the doctors and the lawyers and all these other people come in. And those are always great. But I always had fun with going in there and bringing in like models and bringing in drawings and things like that, and kind of running like maybe a little program with them that gets them involved with drawing and stuff like that. Well, this takes it to the next level. And these are, high school kids that are already starting to think about their future careers. And so what this program is it's basically not quite a competition per se, but they do compete against other teams to generate a project kind of through the courses, or I guess through the eyes of, a budding architect or civil engineer, a landscape architect or structural engineer, whatever. And so you kind of like touch on all of these different things, and including a contractor, you touch on all of the different things that go into our day-to-day lives. And so they pair us up, and we have a team of architects, engineers, and contractors that go and sit down, and we've got 12 students. And what they're going to do is they're going to have a project, and we already have a project in Baltimore, which they're going to design a library that's an infill project. The buildings already exist. A building already exists, and so this year we're going to kind of overlay some LEED or some living building type challenge with them, and try to like really kind of teach them how to make decisions early on about whether or not it's right to like save the building or reuse the building or tear it down, and all these different practices and principles of of LEED, and then how to like basically design all the way through, schedule it out, all of these things. And it's really interesting.
That's pretty cool. When I was in high school, we had a ROP class, which is like a regional opportunity program. It's a more technical training in a certain discipline. And my class was architecture, and this is where I kind of got introduced to what I thought architects did, which was draw houses. So it's a little different. But we didn't have the pairing up with any of the local firms or people or construction or engineering or anything like that. And I think that this is a amazing opportunity. And I know that the volunteer kind of state of this is it's doing really, really well. I know that we have an ACE mentorship thing going on in our area. It's kind of a regional thing. So all the different offices who participate are within a certain region, and they service a certain number of high schools and stuff like that. But it's really neat to see these kids, and we've done, and I'm not taking any credit for this at all. We have some amazing people in our office who participate with this. I've done maybe 2 of them, which was when we did the initial planning of what the ACE mentorship program was going to be in our area. But they are teaching the kids how to build models, and they're teaching them how to do SketchUp, and they're teaching them a lot of neat stuff that otherwise they wouldn't have the opportunity to get mentored on this early on, and possibly thinking about this as a career.
So I was out in St. Louis for the first meeting, so I didn't get a chance to attend. And they'd given them homework for to basically kind of come up with ideas about what a library is and things like that, which I kind of came in and kind of latched onto that and started talking to them about programming and what programming really is. And we started talking about how in early programming stages how you can employ your engineers and everything else alongside the architect as they're designing, so that you can have kind of like a fully integrated project, rather than just the architect designing it out and saying this is what we're going to do, and then giving it to the engineers and saying, well, that's nice of you wanting to do that, but you forgot to do this, and this. So we're really trying to push kind of a more, in this particular session, or in this particular year run, we're trying to, because it's from February all the way through May. And, early on, the architects tend to lead the thing. And one of the things we talked about prior to that is, how do we get everybody involved? How do we get the engineer? How do we get the contractor involved? And really talk through all of this stuff and really show the kids, because most of these kids, they kind of did a raising of the hands, how many kids want to be, an engineer, and, probably 90% of them all want to be engineers, because they think you need to draw to be an architect. And, I don't really know how to draw very well, so I'm going to be an engineer instead of an architect, or, electrical engineer and stuff like that. So, which is really interesting. And so they're going to get, a firsthand, if their path still goes through engineering, they're going to kind of get a firsthand understanding on architects and what architects do, and how their thinking process happens from the early stages on over to the point when they actively engage the engineers. Or they can look at it kind of the way that we're running it, is how does the engineer get himself involved at the earliest of stages, to think about these things, and how maybe you could get your engineer, your mechanical engineer involved with when you're diagramming out a building for like solar solar orientation, or how you're going to do some some solar harvesting and stuff like that. So there was all sorts of really fun things that we started talking about, and it's very exciting for me, because I get to see the look on their faces that they're sitting there and they're listening to you, and they're just kind of really trying to absorb everything that you are you're telling them. And again, a lot of these kids want to become engineers, but you almost see like this spark. And I was talking to these one kids that wanted to be a electrical engineer, and that was the one that I kind of, I don't want to say pick on, but I kind of started asking him. I was like, okay, describe to me a library. What is a library? And at first he started, kind of, well, a library is for books, and, in stacks, and you go in and you check them out kind of thing. And I was like, okay, but keep going with that. keep going. And I started pulling more stuff out. And he got really excited about it and really started to talk about it more in an architectural type way. And I was just like, see, you could think about it more that way. And I was like, and even if you become an engineer, think about everything that you do as kind of a design opportunity. And he was just like, never really thought about it that way.
Yeah.
So it was very cool. And I like programs like this. And one of the things that I, was wondering if anybody else out there knows of other volunteer opportunities that are more geared towards inspiring kids to get into the design, engineering, and construction fields. Because obviously, as we've talked on many occasions, we need to inspire people to come into the profession. And things like ACE are definitely one of those opportunities. And I was curious if there was more. And it was interesting that you had talked about that, because I don't really remember anybody coming in and talking to me about architecture. I think I was self-guided into the profession.
Yeah. I think something loosely related, not I guess very loosely related, but maybe more viewed as an opportunity, is the Life of an Architect's Playhouse competitions coming up. That would be a cool thing to run through a program like that, but it's also an opportunity. I know, like Marcus Crow down in Australia's, he's shredded the ideas with his kids, and he's going to work off that. I thought that was kind of cool because it's a way to mentor kids into something loosely related to architecture.
Yeah.
So fun little side note. We'll put a link to the Playhouse competition this year.
What's really cool about Mark is he really does get his kids involved with, the profession. I mean, he practices out of his house. Yeah. He's got a nice studio there, and you can, his kids are always at the drawing boards, working on stuff with him. And, it almost feels like, it kind of keeps him young and keeps him invigorated because, he's got his kids who are just equally excited about what, daddy does as well as what daddy does.
Right. Well, hey, let's take a minute out and talk about our first sponsor.
All right. Well, our first sponsor is Arcat. So we're all pretty busy, and sometimes we feel like we could use another hand to help out. Would you like somebody to draw CAD details for you, create BIM objects for you, or write specifications? How would you like them to do that all for free? Arcat is your answer. Arcat has already done this work for you. Search the Arcat libraries for CAD, BIM, specs, catalogs, videos, and more. All of the content is created for you, free of charge, and no registration required. Stop registering on sites for content. Just come to Arcat and find what you need. Arcat has created a website devoted to you, the building professional. To find building product information fast and hassle-free, check out Arcat today at arcat.com, and don't forget to provide feedback on the site. There's a button on the right-hand side of every page. Have a suggestion to make Arcat better? Click the feedback button and let them know, and tell them Archispeak sent you. Thanks, Arcat, for sponsoring this episode of Archispeak.
Hey, did you guys see what Mark LePage posted on, I think it was on Instagram?
Yeah.
About his recent visit to the Arcat office?
Oh, yes.
This is what I got to experience late last year at Autodesk University when I went to visit the Arcat booth and say hi to our friends there. And I didn't talk about it at that time, but it seems like some little morsels are escaping the Arcat confines, and it looks like we're getting a little glimpse of what they're working on. So maybe we'll put a link to that, but I won't say it because I haven't been told that I can. But there's a little video posted by our friend of the show, Mark LePage, who put that up on Instagram. So I'll try to find that and put that in the show notes because there's some pretty cool stuff coming out of the Arcat labs, I'll say. So cool times, right, that we're living in.
No, I'm pretty excited. I know, Mark was more kind of involved with, he was in there and he was kind of testing out the paint, type features and things like that. But I'll be interested to see, where they take all of this and how, and this is kind of a prompting to for you to talk about some of the things that you were recently doing. But, it's really interesting to see where, VR is going within the design profession, what we're going to be able to do with it, and not just limit it to, hey, let's get in there and tour a building that's under concept, or maybe let's kind of paint or mark something up or something like that, but to do like fully integrated type practice stuff where you're able to pull in some of the things that they do, where you're able to go to this one-stop shop and click on something and find, I think I'm going to use this type of roofing, material, or that type of roofing material. And, you can go and you can find it on their website, and you can download details, you can download specs and things like that. Well, I'd like to see how we're able to kind of like fully integrate that into kind of this bigger picture, bigger idea. And I don't know where I'm going with that.
Well, we are in an amazing time of development. I mean,
totally
it's moving so fast. So it's interesting because there are companies out there working incredibly hard on trying to make the next revolution in this kind of stuff, and so they're listening to ideas like the one that you just brought up to try to do that. So and we've done a lot of work over the last year in VR, and what was cool was at the class that I'm teaching, which is like an emerging technologies class for the profession of architecture. And we've done a lot of cool stuff and a lot of investigative stuff in this class to kind of open up a broader view of how technology plays a role in the profession. In this last class that I just did, we brought in the guys from HMC to talk about VR, and they gave an amazing presentation on kind of the history of VR, and there's some pretty funny stuff that back in like the late 30s that had been developed. I mean, if you go back to the 1800s, there was stereoscopic photography, right? Two black and white images, and you put them in the kind of viewfinder, and they were taken kind of 6 inches apart, and it gave the illusion of parallax. And it's pretty cool to go back that far and kind of see where it's come. And now you're in a fully immersive environment with the fanny pack on your face, and you get to walk around in the room.
Is that how you describe it? Is a fanny pack on your face?
That's what I call it. Yeah.
Awesome.
So you've got this amazing set of tools, and because of the computation that's going on behind the scenes, it's able to finally get to a place where people don't get sick doing it. I mean, that's really been the leap in the last couple of years, is that gone are the days of extreme sensitivity to motion sickness because of high frame rates and just like major computing power happening behind the scenes, because it's rendering all this stuff. It was interesting to hear the presentation by our two guys, Chris Grant and Francisco Penaloza, who have been doing all the research in this area and doing the implementation. And they talk about how one of the, I guess, most illustrative little pieces of their presentation, they asked all the students, because we've got about 90 students in the class, and it's like, okay, so who renders their own images? And a few brave souls raise their hand, and it's like, obviously everybody has to render their own images in school. And so then it's like, well, how long does that take? Okay, so raise your hand if it's taken 5 minutes to render an image, and everybody's got their hand up. Okay, now keep your hands up if it's taken an hour to render an image. Okay, now keep your hands up if it's taken 5 hours and 10 hours, and okay, so the guys leading the talk have done renderings that have taken days and days to do. I mean, I've done same thing, because we've been doing it for a long time, and
you put the little sticky note on the screen that says
don't touch,
render in progress, please do not touch.
Right, exactly. And so that's not necessarily the case anymore, right? Where we're talking about just you could call saving an image out of SketchUp or rendering, even though it's
real time.
But yeah, it's real time. That's what it is now. And so we're working with tools like Lumion, and we're working with tools like Autodesk Live, where it is rendering the image as you see it, and it has some amount of fidelity to it. Now, it really depends on the hardware you're running and the software that you're running at that point. But if you're looking at these immersive VR experiences, they are rendering a frame in, I think he said, 90 milliseconds.
Wow.
Right? Because it has to render 90 frames per second at high definition resolution, at 1080p. So you're looking at things that it has to render in 90 milliseconds, the whole image. So what can you actually cram into that? And that is really where a lot of our work is, finding the balance of what you can cram into that, how dense of a model, how big of texture maps, that kind of stuff. So there's companies, obviously, that are really pushing the limits here. We've got Iris VR, we've got Autodesk doing a lot of stuff. And it's pretty amazing to actually get in, because you actually forget about all that technical stuff once you're actually in the architecture.
Right. Take a look at, and I use this plugin for Revit, and it's called Enscape, Enscape,
yeah.
And it's amazing because it does real-time rendering, and you can rotate the thing around, and it's fully rendered.
Yeah.
And as you're rotating it around, rotating that view, it's re-rendering that view real time, so that you can kind of see, you can move the your shadows back and forth, you can move the sun positioning and everything else, and all of that's being done right in front of your eyes, right in front of the client's eyes, which was really helpful on many of the things that we've used Enscape with, because we'll just pull it up, pop it up on the screen, and they're like, well, you're suggesting doing some adding some fins on this for texture and shadow play and things like that. Is it really going to do that? Well, we've got our model, our Revit model, located, using the proper GPS coordinates of exactly where that building is. So it's got the sun angle and it's got all of those other things. So then when you drop it into Enscape, they're seeing exactly how at whatever given time you choose how the light is going to be played off of the face of that building. And it's amazing to be able to kind of make decisions almost immediately.
Yeah, it's fantastic. We're doing the same thing in other software, and it is a design tool.
Yeah.
As much as it is a presentation tool. And I talk about that with VR too. It is a design tool as much as it is a presentation tool. I mean, it's valuable for both things.
And that's what, both the production and design tool. I mean, I'm, obviously, as much as I'm excited about the production side of things, I really am excited more so about its design capabilities and being able to fully immerse, because we have, we in the analog way of doing things right now, we generate all of these renderings, and they may be from a 3D model, but most of them are still 2D images that we're sending off to a client, and they don't, even though you can see it better, you can understand it a lot better than it was back in the day when you were hand sketching or just rendering something and throwing it up in Photoshop where it's really flat. You're starting to be able to understand what the textures are doing, what the sun's doing off of the texture, but it really it has so much more opportunity now. So you basically are putting this thing on a little virtual lazy Susan and rotating it around for them and flipping it upside down and letting them go inside and walk around and all of that stuff before it happens, so they really understand what it is that you're delivering to them. And those are the things that are really exciting.
It's a different kind of a mindset and set of expectations, I think, as architects we have to convey to clients and to designers, because I had a good talk with the guys after their presentation. We went out to lunch, and one thing that Francisco brought up was that, a lot of designers think, I don't need to use this. I already have this workflow that I use, and it's always worked for me. And they were about to give a presentation, and they wanted to get into it before they showed the client what it was actually going to look like. They thought it was a good idea to experience it themselves before the client did. What a thought. So they got in it, and they realized there were some things that were really amazing, and there were some things that really needed some work. And they had never, there was whole areas of the model that they hadn't really developed, and they'd actually kind of avoided, and they were able to go into those with the VR headset and experience it themselves first person, and really, I guess it really spoke to them what they needed to do.
Right.
And from a completely new viewpoint. And so people who are out there who are kind of wondering, if this is something they should invest in, you really need to try it. I mean, one of the first slides in our guy's presentation, it was so cool because they said VR is like cake. Everybody knows that you could talk for days and days about what cake tastes like, but you don't actually know until you try it yourself, until you eat a piece of a cake. And VR is exactly like that. You can talk about it. You can talk about how great it is, or that it's this next thing that is just a fad, or, everybody has an opinion about it, but you don't actually know until you try it, and you've got to try it. You just have to try it. So I encourage everybody out there to get in there and do this kind of stuff. And then set an expectation with your client. No, it is not photorealistic. It is not V-Ray renderings that have all of the nuance of what materials can deliver. It is an experience, and it doesn't matter that it can't hit that level yet. It really doesn't matter.
No,
it is
really, in the design tool stage of it, should it?
No.
This is giving you the impression of what it's going to be. Later on, you're gonna be able to do areas that are photorealistic.
Yeah, if you have to sign off or give a big presentation or put it on a billboard or something, right? You're going to do that.
Right.
But for this for what it's great for is it's already there. And we've had clients who were very reluctant to show user groups what it could be like to be in a space because it wasn't quote unquote done yet. It wasn't like really pretty picture yet. And so then, because they hadn't experienced it themselves, so then they got into it and they're like, okay, we need to show this to them today. They need to get in here today. And we've had clients redesigning spaces. We've had architects redesigning spaces. We've had amazing experiences with this stuff so far. So it's really cool to kind of expose this to the students in the classroom.
Yeah.
And I think that, this is just one of the classes. And I guess I kind of designed the class. What would I want to know about if I wanted to know what emerging technologies are going on in the profession? So we've had a lot of cool topics. We've talked about real-time rendering. We've talked about point cloud capture with drones. We've talked about digital fabrication. We had
nice
friend of the show, Terry Moore. I had her come in and she talked about digital fabrication and model to fabrication. It's really cool stuff. They're doing some amazing work at her studio. So a lot of neat fun things, and I think the students have been appreciative of it. And it's just been a fun class to kind of show off all of the amazing stuff that's going on in technology and the profession of architecture lately.
Excellent. These are some of the cool things that I like about being able to do, kind of this outreach from the profession to inspire people about what we do and hopefully kind of encourage them to come and do it too.
Yeah, it's fun. Architecture can be fun. I don't know if you knew this, but
I've heard that. I've heard that.
All right, Neil, tell us about somebody that we need to know about.
Okay, well, let's talk about BQE Software. This episode is sponsored by them. They are an AIA Advantage partner, BQE Software, and they are the makers of Archioffice. So let me tell you a little bit about Archioffice. Actually, in my experience, I've actually met the person who created this software, and that's Stephen Burns. And I met him years ago, actually, at a Macworld conference.
What's that? Macworld? Ancient history.
Ancient history, yes, unfortunately. I went to many of those. Anyway, I met Stephen, and he showed off Archioffice, which was his creation that he created for his own firm, actually. And then eventually started selling it on his own and partnered up with BQE Software, and it's evolved a bit over time. But what is Archioffice? Archioffice is the only office and project management software designed specifically for architects, as Stephen did himself. It will help you manage people and projects while you focus on designing great architecture. Whether you are working remotely or on site, Archioffice allows you to monitor the status of your projects and tasks and send out invoices in an accurate and timely manner. I've actually used the software itself, and it's really very interesting the way it can put together your time and how that gets put into invoices, and you can track all of your projects and see where they are on a continual basis. And it's very, very helpful in managing the office. We've been talking a lot about very inspirational things about design and all of that on this episode, but this is really getting into the nuts and bolts about how you can run your office and make it more effective. And ArchiOffice really helps do that. So for our podcast listeners, they can get a fully functional 15-day trial of ArchiOffice at bqe.com/Archispeak. So we encourage all of our listeners to go over to that link, bqe.com/Archispeak, and check out the software. And we appreciate them for sponsoring this episode of Archispeak.
It's one of those things that just makes your life easier so you can go do more of the stuff you want to do, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. and one of the things that was mentioned at the top of the ad read was that they're an AIA Advantage partner. And what that means is if you're an AIA member, you get a discount. So that's if you just search for that, just Google that AIA Advantage Partner, you'll see that AIA has links to a bunch of different software partners on their website, and BQE is one of them. So check it out. All right, so last thing here, maybe last topic. We'll see what happens. I was thinking a little bit about the link that you sent us earlier, Cormac, and a few of our listeners have mentioned this as well, which is this masterclass thing, this Frank Gehry masterclass. Did you sign up?
Yeah. I was the first one. I was in line. No.
Yeah. So for $90, you can get 3 hours of learning about architecture, which I have no idea what that means. The class is not out yet, but you can learn from Fogg himself and learn something about architecture. But I think the bigger story here, and this is what Neil brought up a little bit earlier, was look at all this stuff that's happening in the world of education. And how kind of democratized it's become because of the internet, right? Now we've got Werner Herzog teaching filmmaking. We've got Annie Leibovitz teaching photography. We've got Stanford putting up this free architecture class. I don't know if you guys signed up for that. I did sign up for it. It hasn't started yet. It starts in like a week and a half. But
is that the Stanford one or the Harvard one?
There's Oh, good question. I think it is actually Harvard. So,
I signed up for the Harvard one because it's a kind of like an architecture 101 sort of course, but it's kind of interesting to see how, I guess, for a professional to see how we're preparing students to come out and come work with us.
Yeah. It's what's interesting about this one is it's how to view and learn. I thought that the description of it was really interesting because you learn how to read architecture as a cultural expression.
Oh,
and so to me, this anybody could take this, right? You don't obviously have to be an architect, and I think this is kind of one of those classes that it has a wide appeal because of that description to me, where people talk about style all the time, or they talk about form, and they talk about the way buildings make them feel when they're not trained in architecture. And so this could be a really kind of enlightening class to take in learning how to read architecture. I think this is something that, people talk about paintings and how do you read art and how do you listen to music and what is it telling you? And people pull deeper meanings from all of these artistic expressions. And so this is, I think, kind of a neat idea to teach this as a class and then give it away for free. So
yeah,
it's pretty interesting time that we're living in because of what's going on with these big names with lots of resources putting stuff out there for cheap or free so that people can learn. I mean, the proliferation of online teaching, right, with lynda.com and Coursera and Khan Academy and all this stuff. It's iTunes University. It's pretty amazing what's going on with the education system right now.
Yeah, that edX is the nonprofit initiative between Harvard and MIT, and it offers classes. Actually, it offers classes in all sorts of things, and actually part of that is Berkeley and Stanford, Boston U, even University of Maryland, kind of our local one, and a bunch of international ones. And you're right. I mean, the thing that I find very interesting about it is it kind of democratizes education so that it is accessible to everybody.
Yeah, and if you were to use the argument that, okay, not everybody's got internet connection and not everybody can, there's so many public resources available for that kind of thing. There's I don't think anybody would complain about you watching this stuff at the library.
Right. And these are baby steps. This is the first, kind of like volley into, I mean, if we're being honest, I mean, yeah, we're like our children and stuff have been growing up in this information technology age and stuff like that. But I mean, if we really look at it, I mean, hell, my oldest is 16 years old, and at 16, he was born in 2000, and how much technology did we really have kind of immersed into our day-to-day lives in the year 2000? Not a lot, really. We had some, but not like it is now, not that fully intertwined. So opportunities like this are only the beginning of some things that are going to be just, the amazing future that everybody is going to be able to, given the opportunity and access to the internet, are going to be able to learn about, I'm looking right now at the edX site, learn about relics in Chinese history.
Yeah, crazy.
Or object-oriented programming, and just, and so on and so forth. And it's just interesting things, and to be able to open that up to what is typically studio-based, you got to be there to learn about it, field of architecture.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah. One of the shifts that we've seen at the university here is that we don't teach people how to use computer programs anymore. When we went to architecture school, nobody taught us how to build models, and nobody taught us how to draw, right? It was kind of an expectation, and learn by doing and learn from others, right? It was a very collaborative effort. How do you ink on Mylar, right?
Right.
One of those things. So now we don't teach programs at all. It's lynda.com. The whole school has access to Lynda. And so now that's on you. That's on the student to learn that stuff. Let's talk about bigger stuff that we normally haven't had the time because we've been busy teaching you how to use whatever software.
Right.
And so now, because all these resources are available, I mean, heck, that's one of the reasons I started getmethod.com, was to teach people how to use design tools. It's just available anytime you want, and it's what I say, it's learning without a speed limit. If your speed limit, if you have the appetite, then there's nobody stopping you and holding you back from only attending class once a week. So this is pretty cool stuff to be able to consume at your leisure, right? And it's just like
right.
It's the Netflix of learning. So pretty neat stuff going on out there.
That sounds like a good spot to wrap it up.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, before we go, we'd like to thank our episode sponsors. First, we have ARCAT. Check out all the features they offer at arcat.com. We're also sponsored by BQE Software, the makers of ArchiOffice. ArchiOffice is the only office and project management software designed specifically for architects. Get a fully functional 15-day trial of ArchiOffice over at bqe.com/Archispeak. And make sure to visit the website at archispeakpodcast.com for links to our catalog of episodes and for signing up to our newsletter, which includes links to everything we mentioned in the episode. And between episodes, join the conversation on the Archispeak Podcast Facebook page or on Twitter. Links to everything can be found at the main site at archispeakpodcast.com. Stay subscribed, everyone, and thanks for listening.
See you next time.
Thank you.
I joined the choir to sing. They're all competing for some other thing. I joined the choir to sing. I joined the choir to sing. They're all competing for some other thing. I joined the choir to sing. Other thing, I joined the choir to sing. service my city with all that I've got. But when I'm running, pleasure is here, so I run. I'm meant to run, this is there. Spend time with folks at the home. How you doing? What you doing, boss? With my people who know how to get you right. Spend time with folks at home. Now I like it hot and mighty. With my people who know how to roll. I joined the army in June. I joined the army in June. I lost my ass, so please not tell. I joined the army in June. I serve my nation under God's service, my city with all that I've got. But when I'm running, pleasure is here, so I run. I'm meant to run, this is clear. I serve my nation under God's service, my city with all that I've got. But when I'm running, pleasure is here, so I run. I'm meant to run, this is clear. Archispeak, you can say I eat, read, race my beat, my base, chase the one thing